Hi there. Happy 250th. What is it? A semi 250 years. Happy 4th of July. Everybody. It's me, Leslie Plazz, back with Zazoo Plazz for my Sunday weekly July 5th, 2026 report. Yeah. Wow. We get some storms here. So tonight is the 5th. Let's see, about 9:45. So yeah, we just in Connecticut here. We had rain. We had last night I was hanging out here, and we just kind of trying to go to sleep. Trying to just chill and relax. And the storms were intense. There was lightning and thunder. Then I heard all the fireworks going off, and then later I was sleeping. The rain woke me up. It was so loud, and I thought, all those people. So then today I'm watching videos about, everything that went down in Washington, how they had to evacuate, for all the storms and everything. It was, this is not the kind of thing. When I was growing up, my parents hated, some things that they hated and avoided at all costs were crowds, loud crowds, especially, well, let's just say, no, they took me to the Big E, which is the New England Fair in September, but that's different. They would take me to something like that, but not somewhere like just to see fireworks or just for that. That wasn't, just to sit on the ground and that. So we had picnics and stuff. It was just not their thing. I went to see fireworks like later with my friends when I was a teenager and, in my 20s. I remember going mostly with friends' families, for when I got to be a little bit older. But my parents didn't. And then I don't know if it was as much of a thing. What we would do is, like on 4th of July, if we went over my aunt's house or my grandparents' house, Mime and Pepe's house, because we're French, we'd have like a clam boil, which, since my family was from Fall River, Mass, it was a thing by the beach. They'd do that. Or if they weren't by the water, they'd put a big pot on the stove and put, what do they call that stuff? Cheesecloth, and put like a layer of clams and a layer of potatoes and sausage and all this stuff. And I just thought everybody did that. But not everybody did that, and it'd be like 100 degrees in my grandmother's kitchen. She'd have the big pot on her stove was about the size of this, my little table here. It was about this big across and about that tall. And she'd have, she was this little thing, and she'd be cooking all day. And then, July, it's hot, no air conditioning. I don't know how we all did it. There'd be about 10 people in that kitchen. All my mom and my aunt, and my everybody, my uncle's wife, and my Mime and Pepe would be in and out, trying to get beers and Cokes, bottled Cokes. We had the glass bottles. These are the things I remember as a kid, and thinking, I don't want to go in there. But they give me and my cousin, we're about the same, we're the same age. They give us little Dixie cups, to make some lemonade. We'd have those little Dixie cups with the jokes on them, And she was very classy, my Mime. She actually had the holder, the wooden holder for the Dixie cups in the corner of her kitchen. And I don't know why I'm thinking about this, but they had some really gross stuff like I don't know, strange jars and things down in their basement. Smelled like gas, like something was gonna explode. if I ever went down there, it was a very rough basement with spiders and, you know, and I remember the gas smell and, you know, um, she went down there though. She kept stuff. I don't know if she ever washed. She must have had her wash and dryer down there. It was a scary house. It was just, very rough the way they had it, but cozy. And they had like this like glass. It was like cut at an angle. It was like an eye washer glass. So if you got something in your eye, it was jagged and it was a little glass. And they like put water in it and go like this if they got something in their eye. I just remember it. And people having kids now, they're thinking about the kind of stuff that was just lying around for us kids to get into. She had, oh, it'd be fun. She set me and my cousin up with jarts. There were these, now kids, they didn't have child safety caps on them. These things were about this with a big spike on the end and like little plastic wings and a handle, metal handle, and you go like this and you'd fling it. One person would be down there, your cousin would be down there, I'd be over here, and she'd be like, they go way up in the air and then they, shoot straight down. We were throwing them. We didn't know what the hell we were doing. It's amazing somebody didn't, get skewered because everybody did it though. Or we'd play cards or we'd just, I don't know, we would be left to our own devices. We didn't have devices. We were left to our own devices, which were not devices. As children know them today, they were make something up, go play hopscotch on that. She had like a sidewalk going up to her front door. And my oldest cousin, who was 8 years older than us, she was a bossy boomer. She is bossy boomer. It's her birthday today. She's 69. But I remember her, we'd play this game called Red Light, Green Light. So you'd start and then she'd say, red, green light, and you'd go a little bit, the goal was to get as far as you could. But then she'd say, red light, and you have to stop where you were, you'd have to freeze. But she was always the one calling red light, green light. And we were always the ones going and stopping. There were, it was not a close relationship because she was so much older than us. She was out, by the time we were in middle school, she was already on her own, like almost married, and, she was so far ahead of us. So, but that's how it was. She'd be the one bossing us around, and looking at wherever we were going. She had her nose in our business, she was, but yet when we got a little bit older and my other cousin, who was 2 years younger than her, the two of them would sit on the steps, and talk about, secret things, boys, um, music and stuff, Beatles. I don't know what they were into, but their Beatles was like our Bee Gees. They would talk about all this hippie boomer stuff. I don't know. And then we'd come up and we'd say, hey, you want to play? We'd have balloons, We'd be blowing up balloons. We're like, you want to play? And they're like, get out of here, kid. Get out of here. They'd shoo us away. And I remember thinking, we don't belong. They don't want us. We're little kids, And that feeling, I think, persisted. I wasn't going to go all the way into detail on this, but, I'm really thinking deeply about this and why we didn't have there was no talk of generations. There was just older people than you and younger people than you. And you mostly stuck with people about your age, a year or so older or younger, in school. Kids you were in school with. The older kids, they'd beat you up. They're not going to, you have to be tough. When you went out on your bike or in the neighborhood, I knew where the big scary boys lived, the ones who picked on little kids like me. And I knew where the cool kids lived, and the ones who were younger than me that I had to kind of look out for. So that kind of stays with you, as you get older. Like, you're still that same person, but you aren't. I mean, you've grown, but certain things, they they go with you because you get older, and those people are still older than you, and those people are still younger than you, and you're still in the same position that you were, right? You know, I mean, and then when you look around and it's just you, and you're like, okay, well, who's in charge here? Because I still feel like I'm that kid. I don't, you know, I'm not going to boss kids, right? Kids who were younger than me, they look to me for, guidance, but I wouldn't boss them around, because I knew how that felt. Anyway, so maybe you can relate. I don't know. And it's not that I'm putting anybody down. It's that I'm good at picking up. I'm good at picking up energies from people in groups and people on one-on-one. I can read people pretty well. And yeah, it's like Fraser said, well, baby, I got you pegged. I don't know what I'm gonna do with this tossed salads and scrambled eggs all over my face. I don't know. Anyway, I got a lot to say. So the sun is on 14 of Cancer. That's my Vesta, which is like, it's like, picture the Statue of Liberty with the torch. It's kind of like keeping the home fires burning. What do you hold the torch for? What really burns you? And oh yeah, and let's see. Lilith is at my Mars, 22 of Sagittarius, right around where my Mars is. So it's across from my part of fortune, which is interesting that Lilith is opposite my part of fortune, which is like the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. Lilith, she's badass. She's a badass. She's a bad mama, whatever. She's like that hidden, dark feminine that we're afraid to bring out into the light. But she's got stuff to say. And, my natal Lilith is in Aquarius, so she's a little quirky. Yeah, kind of, yeah. But Lilith in Sag is pretty blunt. I think she doesn't hold back. Kind of like me. Yeah. So, I was thinking, okay, so the moon is in Pisces, so we got water, we got Mercury in Cancer, we got a bit of water, but we're starting to get some fire. Jupiter is going into Leo, Venus has been in Leo, you know, so we got Mars and Uranus in Gemini, so that's a little bit of air, and so also what's interesting is we had some. So I talked about that. I think I might make a quiche tonight. I have goat cheese, feta cheese. I might make a quiche. I'll see. I might just end up taking the chicken enchiladas out of the freezer. I might not feel like cooking. I don't know. I'll see. Yeah. So we're going into Leo season, and there's some wildfires burning out west, which like Colorado area. I hope that our son doesn't have to go out there and put him out because he's on the wildfire, Connecticut wildfire, relief team. That they travel, they go if other states need them. They go. So he's been on that for a couple years. He had to go out. I think Oregon, Washington area. He's been, and then in Connecticut, when we had fires. He He's an Aries. He's a first responder. He loves that. He loves coming to the rescue and putting out fires and things. It's been quite a week, though, in our family. So it was my ex and our wedding anniversary was July 1st. And come to find out, I mean, you can't make this stuff up. So I think last week I might have talked about my husband's cousin. Maybe I didn't. He lost his cousin who was in his 70s So that was sad. But then, like within a couple of days after, my cousin, she's a millennial. She had her baby on our anniversary, which is the day that we got married. Is the day she had her baby. I mean, she was 1 year old at our wedding, and she was hobbling around in pain because my cousin, who was in our wedding party, she and her husband, they had, and their other daughter was, who was 4 at the time, was our flower girl, and the little one was like 1. And my cousin was in such a hurry to get everybody dressed and get to, our house in the morning. She just shoved the baby's shoes on. She had a beautiful little dress, little black tiny shoes. She didn't take the paper out of the toe of the shoe. She just put the shoes on the kid, you know, and they fit, I guess they fit. But the kid was just beginning to walk. So I remember her, you know, stomping around to Love Shack. We were playing Love Shack, and she was on the dance floor with her dad, and she was kind of jerking back and forth. And they didn't know until after they took her shoes off later in the day. The poor kid, her feet had been shoved in there, and she was in pain. And she was like toddling around on the tips of her toes. Poor kid. Oh, but she couldn't talk yet, so she couldn't really say, my feet hurt. But she's just kind of making the best of it. It's so cute. Um, so yeah, so again on July 1st, she had a little bit of discomfort, but then she got a big reward for it. So she had a little girl. So that was a happy day for our family. We have a new little baby. Um, so yeah, so I'm sure my mom and my aunt were looking down, and my uncle, everybody in the family looking down and being happy, feeling, a new little one in the family. So that kind of goes with the readings today, about the little ones, the innocents, the ones who were, you know, humble, or you know, my people might call me naive. They would wrongly, I think, assume that because I'm sort of laid back and smiling and friendly, kind, um, that I'm a pushover. But they would be wrong. As anyone who has ever come up against me has found out. Big surprise when they see that side of me. I am. I'm fine, until you show me what you're really like, and then I pick it up, and then I go from there. And I really, I don't really ever have to do anything because, God takes care of that. God takes care of the justice, evening things out. So yeah, there have been a couple of times when I have needed to open my mouth. Let's just say, but you don't want that. You don't want a Scorpio unleashed. Let's just say you don't want that. And we know you don't want that. So we Scorpios, we keep a lid on it, usually, unless it's called for. And it has to be really, you really have to deserve it to get the Scorpio treatment. But you know when you do, you deserved it if you got it. Yeah, you did something. Anyway, yeah. So is that all I have to talk about? Oh, I have a little cucumber plant growing. So my son had given me some tomato plants. So I think I talked about this. I went out, got a pot and everything, and one of those green stakes, and I put the little tomato plants out there, and they didn't make it. They went. So I'm the green reaper. So I said, okay, so now I gotta go get another. First of all, I said, oh, I got the plants. Now I gotta get a pot. I got the pot, and then I didn't have the plants, and I had to go get more plants. I might actually go get a new. They have these tomato plants that are already in the pot. They're already this tall, and they have cages attached to them for $20 at like Lowe's. Who knew they had such things? So I have a little porch out here. I said, I was going to get the tomato too. And I said, well, let's see how the cucumber does. And it's growing. So I said, well, I must have enough light, because the cucumber's doing really well. And it gets rain, so God, when it rains, I don't have to water it. So I said, maybe I'll go get tomatoes and then I'll have tomatoes and cucumbers. Maybe I'll do that. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see. Um, yeah. So, yeah, getting hungry. Gotta have my paleo hot chocolate rice cake snack. Okay. So, okay, Zazoo, get to the reading, get to the Bible. Okay. We have Zechariah, chapter 9. Talking about more of this rejoicing, the celebrating, daughter Zion, Jerusalem. Talking about the king, about the king coming, a just savior, right? Riding on an ass, a donkey, not even a grown-up one, a young one, right? A colt. So that's a sign, that's, in other words, here he is, the Son of God. He's riding on this, beast of burden, basically, to illustrate the point of, humbling yourself and doing what you have to do. He was trying to show people, you know, you don't you don't ride into town like, Taylor and Travis, whatever their names, with the big wedding at the Madison Square. You know what I mean? The big people in the black cars coming in, and no, you ride the subway. Take the subway, and so that's just an example. That went on this weekend too. We had that big celebrity. I'm not into celebrity culture. Like, ooh, I mean, she's okay, but I don't really listen to her music that much. It's millennial music, and I didn't have girls. I have boys. So, I'm more of like a rock kind of person, rock classic, 80s, 90s, 70s, 80s, 90s, late 70s to, late 90s, maybe early 2000s kind of music is what I listen to. And, I mean, whatever. She has her fans, and I don't watch football, so I don't get into that. It's a big circus. P.T. Barnum's birthday today. He was of the Barnum and Bailey circus. It's all circus. He said there's a sucker born every minute, right? And he was only too happy to to put on a great show for their benefit, right? And he was from Bethel, Connecticut. Anyway, where did I go with this? Oh yeah, about how Jesus came in. He came in humbly. If you were around today, he'd take the subway, or he'd show up in a minivan or something, like, or whatever. You know, he wouldn't be in a grand, big showy car, right? And that's celebrity culture. So he wouldn't be calling attention to himself. In other words, it said, and this Zechariah was predicting how Jesus was going to come. He said, he's going to banish the chariot, the horse. It's year of the horse, and the warrior's bow. That's war, right? He's talking about war. So that's interesting. He's going to proclaim peace to the nations from sea to sea and from the rivers to the ends of the earth. That's, it's like in our patriotic songs, from sea to shining sea, from the mountains to the prairies and to the oceans white with foam. God bless America. Does it sound familiar? A lot of those sentiment in those patriotic songs comes from, these Bible readings. The founding fathers had an ideal. They they were optimistic, uh, but they put, you know, they were also realistic because some of the, the ways they were, they declared independence with a lot of idealism for a perfect world that they didn't. That's a little hint there. Um, a utopia, but they knew, people being people, that they had to put some checks and balances in there for, you know, just in case. So they were realists. They set the foundation. They set, they were, looking at the sky with their feet planted on the ground, in other words. And then we have to take it from there, right? We have to continually, remind ourselves and renew their hopes and dreams, and see how are we doing, right? Both as a country, as a world, and as people, as individuals, So that's what I take from that. Take it with a grain of salt, whatever. I'm just spouting off. I will praise the psalm says, I will praise your name forever, my King and my God. So, that's to say, our King is, is, the commandments say, you, there's only, we report to God, to Jesus, to God through Jesus, right, is where we get our spirit, our life comes from our connection to God, right? So, in other words, instead of having earthly loyalties and simply earthly goals, you can have those, but they have to be in service to God, right? To divine service. So, in other words, just blindly going out and saying you just want to make as much money as you can, or you just want to be as powerful as you can, or name your vice, whatever you want the most of. You can, you'll be hollow inside. You will get that thing and you will feel empty, right? It won't feel meaningful. It won't feel warm. It won't mean anything, because you will have gotten rid of, your soul in the process. So that Jesus is telling us that, these prophets are all telling us, don't consider what you're giving up when you give your energy to something. What does it take from you? What are you getting in return, right? So, and then it talks about how God, has holy works and lifts up the lowly and the falling, right? Raises those who are bowed down. In other words, if you're, having to obey somebody, whether it's, a ruler or an employer, or even in a religion, right? What do? We bow down. We go to church. We bow down. We don't need that, right? Even religious institutions can enslave us, do the work for us, and lull us into a false sense of security, because, we think, oh, we went to church, we're good, we don't have to do anything more. But that's a trap, right? So having accountability for ourselves and our spirit doing the spiritual work is how we take on our yoke burden, so to speak, right? We take up our cross, and that's how we free ourselves, right? So, okay, so part of the Romans, chapter 8 and 9, it says, talks about this too, how we're all in the flesh, we're spirit in the flesh, but we die only if we're, like I said, living for the material world, right? Just living for that. But if we put to death the deeds of the body, in other words, that lower part of us, right? And go emphasize the higher chakras, the higher connection that we have, our divine connection that everybody has then we're living, we're raised, right? Like God raised Jesus. We too will, our lives will be raised up. We'll be protected. And that's the real security. Not, you can have all the insurance in the world. You can have all the, you could put a moat and walls around your house, right? And have, I don't know, all these security guards and everything, right? And yet these people, they're just making a prison for themselves, right? You see all the rich and famous who have all these, walls around them. Well, they can't get out. You want to be famous? Well, yeah, you go out, somebody might try to take you, hurt you, right? But the average person can go and stand out, in the world. Most people, you know. So people still take pot shots on you and your social media page, but you can handle you're protected if you're doing things for the right reason. You're protected. If you're doing it for to be, look at me, yeah, somebody's gonna strike you down. Lightning's gonna come. Yeah, you think you're gonna talk. Anyway. Da, da, da. All right. Come on, Zazoo. Okay, we get it. Yeah. Matthew 11. Let's say, Jesus is saying, "Blessed are you, Father of heaven and earth. You've revealed to the little ones the mysteries of the kingdom." And this is true. It says these great truths are hidden from the wise and the learned, the educated, right? The people, those people, right? In his time, they were like the Pharisees, right? Here they are, these Pharisees. They're sitting in their temples, right? And in their towers, and with their robes, and oh, they're so sure they knew all the laws. They knew everything, right? But they didn't get the simplest things that Jesus was talking about right in front of them. They were so sure that they were right that they couldn't bear the thought that they might be wrong about, that they didn't know everything. And that is the most dangerous kind of, I think, mindset, or heart set, because it's through the heart that we receive these truths. It's not through the mind and the chatter, right? You sometimes I listen to podcasts and I watch videos. They leave me feeling empty. These people, the types with the guy, he talks real loud and then he's got his yes people on either side going, yeah, you're so funny. The type. They're like, oh yeah, so-and-so was talking about this. And then there's other people who only, rehash things that other people say. They don't have any thoughts of their own. They're like, oh, they just they comment on what stupid people are doing, on one of the social media things. Some of the people, like some of these kids, these Gen Z kids, I do listen to because they're so young, but they're pretty wise, and they're very entertaining. So I don't say everybody, I shouldn't say everybody who does that is wrong, because it gives you you need something to jump off on, whether it's Bible or talking about, it gives you idea. It gives the people ideas. But then there's other people who just kind of don't add any, these kids that are pretty good because they add something to it, right? They say, this is wrong. I think this is wrong, and this is why. And, and they make it entertaining, right? But some people just go and trash other people, and they don't offer anything of their own, right? And then you go away and you're, especially these AI things, they'll go on and on about something, and then the AI will make some really glaring mistake, and you're like, oh, yeah, no. And it's taken me less and less time now to spot the BS So what I do is I go through not interested, X, X, X. So I don't have to see the same crap over and over. And the algorithm gets really confused because it keeps, I'll click on something by mistake. It's like some 90-year-old lady doing the swing dance or something. And I was, oh, that's funny. But I only wanted to see it once. And then there I go, and I have like 50 million videos of old people dancing. And I'm like, no. Sometimes you have to make it very clear to the universe what you do and don't want. Okay. And yeah, that's a little side. Uh, so, yeah, in other words, it's Workaholics Day. He says, come to me all who labor and are burdened, and I will give you rest. Okay, so it's also the day in 1994, July 5th, Jeff Bezos started Amazon. And we all remember when that was just a place to buy books. Yeah, just a little shop he set up in his garage. Everybody's got to start somewhere. He had a good idea and he ran with it. So he made a lot of money. But, he stuck with it. It didn't happen overnight. He wasn't making $1 trillion overnight. It, you know, it took him a long time, and things had to, evolve the way that the marketplace evolved, and certain things had to fall away for him to gain traction, right? You gotta, because, up until like in the late 90s, that was a new thing. We used to go to bookstores. There was a ton of bookstores around still. There was Barnes and Noble, there was Borders, um, like Walden Books at the mall, all these, little bookstores. And, Amazon started replacing a lot of that. But we used to have to go. We'd go and, they'd have like Borders would have music, a whole section where you could go and listen to CDs, and it was kind of nice. Maybe you get a coffee or something. They had my ex. He saw Jim Brickman, who was he played the piano. He we saw him another time too. Yeah, at the Bushnell or somewhere. Um, but yeah, he sings like very romantic songs, very nice. Um, but yeah, he saw him there. So that was kind of one of those third places, or whatever people say, a third, not home, not work or school, but like a third place where people could hang out. We had places like that. So Amazon was good in that, maybe you could order books, but at the same time, it took away, I think, that sense of, going out to just browse. People used to browse. Does anybody browse anymore? Everything is so fast. I think we need to bring back browsing, and not online. Browsing, like taking your time. And whenever I travel and I come across a little bookstore or a little funky shop, I like to go and poke around, get a coffee or get a drink and, poke around. And I found the most wonderful books and knickknacks and things on vacations, like out in Tucson. Found some books out there. And then you find like local books. They'll put out books like by authors of that area, wherever you're visiting. And that's cool. You don't get that. I mean, how would you know on Amazon? People, it kills curiosity because they thrust out at you what they want you to buy. And then you get caught up in what everybody else is buying instead of following your curiosity. Bring back curiosity, okay? Yes, Amazon is useful. I buy my, things on there that I can't get anywhere else. But I keep it, I don't spend hours on there, you know, um, mindlessly, right? Looking at, I go, I get what I need, I get off. And my book is on there. So if you're on Amazon, please go and buy Zazoo Plazz. That's my own little push in there. I got to get that in. All right. Okay. So the song is, this is perfectly fits in. Huey Lewis's birthday. He's 76 today, born in 1950. So his song, this is a song from his first single from his album Small World, released in late June 1988, called Perfect World. And this is perfect, for the USA. He was born, around the 4th of July. This is a song about people having dreams and, ideals and things in your mind that you want to have, right? Your own hopes and dreams, and the thoughts that we have. Like he said, about having the perfect boy and the perfect girl meets the perfect girl, right? Like the Taylorvis or whatever. Or that couple that climbed the spire of the Empire State Building this week and got engaged, that kind of thing, right? We think everything should be like that, like perfect. In reality, people meet each other slinging hamburgers, wearing, with my hair in a pony in a braid, with mustard, squirting mustard on my future ex-spouse. That's how we made. That was our meet cute. We both smelled like hamburger grease. I was throwing ice cream at people, right? In the tent at the golf tournament here in Hartford. So, in the days before meeting online and apps and stuff like that, people met imperfectly. They met, in less than ideal situations. And then they just took it from there, right? And you get to know people over the years, and they drift together and you drift apart, but you still have, you carry it with you. You carry with you, your imperfections. And that people you meet are all dealing with their own struggles, right? Their own ideals. Everybody's got somewhere they want to be, right? And that changes. So this song got to number 3 on the Billboard Hot 100. It had a reggae flavor, and it was written by Alex Call, who was his bandmate from this band called Clover. He also wrote the song Jenny 8675309. You know that one. Okay. They said it was a very wry song, WRY, not rye the bread, RY, rye with a W. This is Lewis's usual musical optimism tempered with an element of reserve. So that's perfect. An element of reserve. That's cancer for you, right? That's, anybody who's got cancer, especially sun, prominent in their chart. Yeah, they're optimistic, but they're not getting too carried away, right? They're reserving a little bit for, they'll go out and they'll do things, but they got a shell around themselves. They're not going to make themselves that vulnerable to you, right? So anyway, okay, that's all I got today. So hope you enjoyed that. Hope you learned a couple things, had a couple laughs, and stay cool wherever you are. It's been pretty hot, pretty steamy. It's supposed to cool down a little though this week, I think. So there's that. So if you're enjoy the summer, enjoy the days off if you have them. Enjoy all the summer, because at least here it's going to be cold before you know it. So have fun. I'll be here next week, same place, different time. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.